All right, Keenan, thank you for being on the show. I'm really happy to have you on.
Hmm.
I think you're the first person that's on the show, and I kind of told you this. You're the first one that's actually really accomplished and has like a general path and idea of what you're doing. But at the same time, and because I've talked to Alex about this recently, and you're still trying to figure out where you want to go and take the next step from this point in your career on.
Hmm.
So I'm going to give you a little explanation of the general kind of format of the podcast. So what I
Hmm.
do is I want to go into educational background, so kind of like your upbringing and stuff like that, mainly focusing
Okay.
on high school and college, and then what you did in college to jumpstart your career and kind of the trials and tribulations that you got into during that path, and then we'll go into like passion. We'll talk about everything in between.
All right. It's gonna be a long podcast.
Yeah, that's fine. Dude, the last one I had, and this is why I'm a little slow this morning. I had one yesterday. It was an hour and 40 minutes where me and a friend, he's an artsy person, so we
Okay.
played chess and we took shots every time we lost pieces.
Oh shit.
I ended up a little bit more inebriated than I wanted to be, but that's why I'm a little slow right now.
Oh wow.
But
Okay.
that ended up being almost 2 hours, so I like long talks. They're nice.
Yeah, I can't drink for a while. I gotta tell you. No, I like had we went to a Rangers game as a company, I think last week,
Hmm.
and the CEO went nuts. He bought like a party bus for the whole company and took us out to this Rangers game, and he had a whole box with like open bar and food and stuff, and there were drinks in the party bus, and there was drinks when we got there, and there were drinks on the way back, and
Lots of
I don't
drinks.
know, like I found myself in one of my coworkers' hotel rooms at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and at that point I had like, tried to sleep it off and it didn't work, so I went back to my car and slept it off, and then went back home, and it was like 5 o'clock in the morning. It was probably the worst hangover I've had in a while, so like I needed to stop.
Do you feel like a drastic difference in your hangovers now versus like 3 years ago?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that maybe I know what to do to prevent like really shitty ones.
Hmm.
Like like mixing and stuff like that, and having nothing to eat and drinking, and knowing when to stop and that kind of thing, like being an adult basically, like that kind of helped things out, because I think it's because I know that it's gonna hurt like a mother the next morning if I don't.
Right.
So like it makes you smarter. But yeah.
Planning for the road ahead.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's get started with talking about your kind of upbringing and education background. So, when did you get into the state, or like when did you start? This is a weird way to phrase this question. What high school did you go to? Like, did you go to the same high school that like Alex went to and all that? And
Yeah.
what age you came to the States? Because, I mean, yeah, knowing you, I know that you came from a different country and then started school here later on in life.
Hmm. Yeah, so I went to the same school as my brother, Oyster Bay High School. At the time, that high school to me looked like college, because the school I went to before was like this tiny little. It was 30 students, but
Wait, 30 students in the class or the school?
in the class, yeah.
Okay.
But that class was like the whole grade.
Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah, so trying to think. I think I was 10 when I moved to Switzerland, so I was 15 when I moved to the States.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was sophomore year of high school.
Okay. So as soon as you got to the States, you started at Oyster Bay High School?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sophomore year, and at the time it was very different, because the schooling that I was previously used to was very old-fashioned, very conservative, yeah, very authoritarian, and like they had a different structure. For example, like the teacher, when she would come into the classroom, everyone would stand up, and if you didn't, you'd get detention.
What?
Yeah, the structure was different. I know, crazy, but like the structure was very different. Like, for example, if you wanted to, there was no choice of classes. You all took the same ones, and most of the time you stayed in the same classroom, and the teacher swapped out. And,
Okay. So that's more like middle school kind of. I remember middle school being like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
but that structure was basically the same. And then a lot of the teachers had multiple roles. So, for example, I had my German teacher was also my chemistry teacher, and my history teacher was also my math teacher. So, like, they all kind of had a different role, and like they would like physical, I guess, authority wasn't like frowned upon. I had one teacher who would like pinch his knuckle like this and go and like knock the shit out of my head if I wasn't paying attention.
That's
Yeah,
an interesting technique.
yeah, he like this little thing, and then yeah, it fucking hurt. But, no, I don't know if you're allowed to use language on your podcast, but anyway.
No, yeah, you can. I always tell all my guests this. I think if you take away profanity from a conversation, it makes a conversation less genuine. I
Yeah.
really hate not being able to use profanity because then it's just like you know, sometimes you just need it to really exercise how you felt about that thing. So it fucking hurt means it fucking hurt.
Yeah, and it was diluted. I think it's just diluted a little bit more now in other podcasts. Like it's just more commonplace.
Yeah.
You know, people aren't like even at my job now. It's it's perfectly fine to curse. You should be able to because it expresses your feeling. But anyway, yeah. So school was a little more old fashioned, and it was very small and like very Catholic. And then when I came to the States, everyone was welcoming and they liked the fact that there was a different culture and there was sports and activities and you could pick classes and so there was a lot more opportunities. Yeah, so Alex and I both got to experience that at the same time.
So did you know English when you came to the States, or did you have to learn English when you got here? You knew English, right?
I've known English most of my life, all my life, yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
But it was taught in different capacities. So in Switzerland, they didn't have any English programs. So the only way that I maintained it was just speaking to Alex when I got home, or speaking to my brother Tristan or my parents.
Right.
And Hong Kong at the time was like it was owned by the UK up until '97. So before Switzerland, we lived in Hong Kong for 7 years, and that was a little bit different because it was still very expat. So there were a lot of British expats and a lot of people that just spoke English. So it was very easy to maintain that language.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so you came into the States. You started high school sophomore year. You go to Oyster Bay High School for 2 years, and then what spurred your decision-making process for going to Stony Brook University? Because you also went to this school.
Yeah, well, at the time when I applied, I got into Catholic University of America. Not because I was particularly religious, but because they offered a big chunk of money to go. I was like, all right, well, if it was Jewish based, I would have gone to a Jewish school. But like, they paid like $30,000, so I was like, all right, no problem, I will do that. No, so that Catholic was originally the first choice, but even with what the money they were giving me, I was still paying out of pocket. And I was working my ass off during that time just to kind of make ends meet, and it was just my social life was getting hurt, and I wasn't exercising as much as I wanted to, and it was just like a crazy, crazy time. And so having that balance.
Oh, hey Alex, what's up?
Having that balance was like needed, and Stony Brook, you go from like I think $30,000 tuition to an $8,000 tuition.
Yeah.
It's very different. If my parents are paying for it, then I'd say, sure, I'd just stay there. But at some point, it got very expensive, so I just decided to go with Stony Brook because it was closer. It was a research-based school, and ultimately, that's kind of what I wanted to do. And I don't know. It was probably one of the most successful SUNY schools that we have right now. I think maybe Binghamton is number one or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think for STEM, Stony Brook is definitely the best university to go to. We just have so many resources for those fields. Binghamton is definitely more of a liberal arts oriented school. But, yeah, it's still a great school nonetheless. But so once you got to college, what so what decisions did you make in terms of like your majors or kind of career path you were going to take? Because you said you made the decision to come here for research, so that means like you wanted to go into research. So like in general, kind of what form of research and why?
Well, it wasn't so much research as a role, but more research as a skill. And I think that you can apply that to any industry that you're in. So at the time, that industry for me was finance. My parents were into finance for a long time. That's just what they did. They were very successful at it, and that's what I was kind of raised into. So I gave that a shot. And so my major at Catholic was international economics and finance, and my major at Stony Brook was business management with a minor in marketing and a specialization in sustainability studies.
Oh, cool. It's
Yeah,
pretty similar to what I'm doing.
yeah. I mean, it was useful because it kind of gave me a big, broad range of fields that I could work
Yeah.
in, and it's helpful if you're trying to find a job because no matter what, you can use that skill if you're in medicine or if you're in law or it doesn't matter. Having that management skills can always help. So that's where it kind of came in. But to be honest with you, like real talk, I didn't really care so much. I didn't have that much, I guess, weight on my major and my degree because for me it was always about the work.
Hmm.
And I think that it was unfortunate, but I was working for the piece of paper.
Just for the degree.
Yeah, it could have been any major, and I would have worked for it because ultimately you rarely see people, um, in a professional capacity who are doing what they studied in school. It very rarely happens. I know a lot of like theater majors that ended up being accountants, and I know a lot of liberal arts students or maybe I don't know writing or English students that ended up being doctors. So it's just
You never know what's going to happen. And I
yeah,
talked to one of my friends pretty recently about this, where he was saying like he doesn't know the value of going to like an undergraduate
mhm,
because he thought, and his mindset was like, oh, why should I be taking these tests where some people are better than me? I might not be as good, and like what's the actual value of having that degree? And I was telling him that it's just to prove yourself and to kind of show that you're capable of doing the work.
yeah. And I think that ultimately it is unfortunate, but we live in this credentialized society where you need proof and you need that kind of piece of paper to really show, at least to get you in the running. Unfortunately, but you know I was working full time. I was working more than I was going to school, and for me, like that's where you learn the most.
Yeah, I
If I
agree
could
with that.
forego college and just, you know, work full time and keep trying different jobs and keep trying different careers, that's how you learn. That's how you really pick up the skills. That's how you learn more about yourself. Because if you're stuck in one major, it's not going to help you to keep changing your major over and over and over again. It's just going to extend your time, and at the end of the day, you're going to just kind of going to have a diluted education because it's going to be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a little bit of this. And if you have the opportunity to work and fail a lot, then you have the opportunity to figure out what you really want to do.
Right.
So for me, management and marketing and sustainability, it wasn't a personal choice. It was more so, I know for a fact that these classes I can take on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they're pretty commonplace, and there's a lot of them, so I don't have to worry about schedule, which means I can work more, and I can there isn't as much attendance, and there isn't as much focus on big long projects like research based or like I don't know how math students do it because it is just rough for you guys. It's just
I mean,
rough.
it's not horrible. It's just that I mean, you just have to put in a lot of time. When you're one of those majors that's, again, like in the STEM field, anything computer science, math, anything, medical oriented, it's just hours in. Like you're just going to be studying, doing
Yeah.
homework, just grinding, and, really just getting it into your head. But I mean, for a lot of those people, and I think this is a big distinction, which I kind of want to jump into. For a lot of those people like me, when we're in college, that's like the only thing we're focusing on. When I have classes, like my entire like living, and that's a big reason why most of us live on campus. It's like our entire week and everything we do is based around classes. It's based around the studying and doing the homework and taking the tests. Whereas for you, you started off earlier on with a career, some doing things outside of school and focusing more on getting that experience outside of education. So I want to go into like all the jobs you've had.
Okay.
And I know you work in both like service industry. You've worked in you've worked at a bank. I think you worked at what, J.P. Morgan, right?
Morgan Stanley. Yeah.
Morgan Stanley. Okay. And then now you're working in software development and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
like kind of like the transitions from all those different jobs, and also kind of your balance between work and school. Like you said, your schedule is usually Tuesday, Thursday for being a
Yeah.
commuter, and you work probably like what 40 plus hours a week on top of that.
Mhm.
So just talking about that balance for you.
Okay. Well, I can give you a little like step by step. So I think there was maybe 3 months since I was 12 where I didn't have a job. Like ever since I was 12, I've always had a job. There was a 3 month period I don't know what I was doing where I didn't have one, and I think that it's necessary that you always have something to do. You know, like once you get comfortable just kind of sitting in and you know not doing anything, then you know you get stir crazy. You're not out there experiencing things. You're not learning. You're not making value. You know, and I think that you should always have a job. So my first job was groundskeeper at a hotel in Switzerland. It was actually a hotel that they converted into a summer camp for CD Jews. And I used to like maintain the grounds and clean the rooms and do dishes and stuff like that just for some extra pocket money.
What age was this at?
12.
At 12 years old, you were doing this. Okay.
Well, the what's it called? Childhood labor laws are a little different in Switzerland.
Yeah.
But basically, from there, you know, I had odd jobs here and there, but it was anything particularly concrete. And then once I got to college, I think I started as an intern for my parents' company. They ran a hedge fund, and so I think I did like 4 years there on and off. But it was a lot of research and due diligence and organizing and little marketing here and there, but nothing crazy. And then, you know, after basically doing everything from compliance to finance to everything, I was asked by the head of our IT department to build a website, and I had no idea how to build a website. I was like, okay. So I looked it up online, and it sounds like a very stupid thing to say because like everyone knows this, obviously, but that was the solution to any career, any role you want to take. And it sounds like stupid, but looking it up is literally just Googling it. I know it sounds like something that like your dad would say or something, but like Googling it and just searching it and basically getting those resources for yourself. Resourcefulness at the end of the day is what won. So I learned, you know, there was this website called W3 Schools, and it, you know, gave you kind of coding 101, and I learned how to write in HTML and like a proper simple website, and then I learned about different tools you can use like Dreamweaver and Photoshop and Illustrator, and then, you know, what different kinds of codes there are, like CSS styling and JavaScript, and you know, it's kind of just snowballed, and you learn one thing and then you learn another, and it builds these kind of building blocks and foundations, and then I was ready to make a website, and I did that, and you know, it ended up turning out great. And actually, no, the first time it was really shitty. And the second time it was really shitty. But then, like the third time I did it, you know, you start to kind of learn from your failures. And so once I figured that out, I knew what I was good at. I knew what I liked was the aspect of design. So, you know, that was always in the back of my head. And so, but I knew that I had a foundation in finance, and I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to, you know, forego everything that I just learned just because I liked one little thing. So after working as an intern, I went off to college, and this is where the kind of odd jobs came in. So I started as I'm trying to remember if this is right. Yeah, I worked for Aflac as a junior sales associate. This is when I was in DC. So I worked as a at that time I was just going to school, and then I kind of messed up my first semester. I had like a 2.2 GPA. I wasn't able to pay anything. I wasn't paying attention, and then I came back and then tried again. So when I was in school in DC, and my job was in Bethesda, Maryland, which is about an hour away, and I didn't have any way to get there. So at the time, the job that I was looking for was for people that were like 30 years old. Like they wanted that job. Other people wanted that job that were a lot older than I was and deserved it a lot more. But the first time I went to apply, I made like little business cards and built my resume out and a little cover letter, and I figured out when the boss of that particular office came in, and I asked for an interview. He told me to, you know, get the hell out of here. And then, so to get there, you have to take a train at 5 a.m. To get into Maryland, and then a bus for about 20 minutes to get to that office. So I did that for 7 days straight. And I figured out when the boss walks into the door. I think it was like 8:15 or something. And I handed him a business card and a resume, and I said, "Hey, just want to check on the status of my application. How's it going? Is there anything I can do to make it better?" He'd say, "No, we're definitely not looking. Please stop." And I did that for 7 days, and then at the end of the day, when he was finally ready to have someone work, he had 30 stacks of relatively successful people, each with a different resume, and then he had 30 stacks of my resume. You could tell that this kid wanted to have this job. So that was my first big boy job, where I made 300 phone calls a day, a lot of no's. I built a call script and knocked door to door, and I learned about selling insurance, and I hated every second of it, but that was my first real job. And at the time, in order to pay for school, this is one of the reasons why I left. I knew I had to work a certain amount of hours, so I scheduled my classes to only be on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8:30 to 6:30, so back-to-back classes all the way through. And then Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I worked for Aflac, and that was pretty short-lived, but I worked there pretty much full-time. I'd take the 4:30 a.m. train to get to the station at 5, and then get from 5 over to my office to get started. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays after class, I would go to the main entrance gate, and I was a security guard for 2 years.
Wait, where?
And this is at Catholic University.
Okay.
And that was just Tuesdays and Thursdays after class. But security guard's a very loose term. I sat there and did nothing 6 hours. So I was being paid $10 an hour just to sit there and do nothing. So I was like, all right, well, that's fine. So while I was doing that, I moonlighted, and I basically said, all right, well, if I'm doing nothing and I get all my homework done, I could mess around on YouTube and watch Netflix and do all that kind of stuff, or I could learn and try something different. So I remembered that I liked web development from a couple jobs ago. So I learned how to code, and then I started setting up my own business while I was a security guard. So I built my own website. I spent about 6 months custom coding website templates. I had 30 different templates for different industries and different tiers of complexity based on what they were looking for. And I had a pricing model and different packages, like a social media package and an email marketing package. And if they wanted to focus more on mobile responsiveness, or maybe they wanted different plugins, there was a price for everything, and almost like a checkout system with radio boxes, so you can click and select which ones you want. It was very kind of rustic at the time. I was very rusty. So while I was doing that, I set up the business model, and from my previous job at Aflac, I learned how to generate leads because it was a marketing and sales business. So I basically paid, I think it was $800 for a lead service called Sales Genie that basically gave me a list of every company in a 20-mile radius with the primary business owner, the website, the phone number, and the address. And so it was about 3,000 companies. And at the time I was going to school, I had other things to worry about. So I hired a marketing major, told them for $8 an hour, if you can just cull through this and look at every single one of their websites and tell me if it's a good one, a bad one, or if there's none at all, and just filter out those. So once I found the ones that had either no website at all or a really bad website, it was more down to I'd say 1,000. Mm-hmm. So I had 1,000 leads to operate off of. And so I built a call script after that, not to sell, because call scripts for selling are dead. Like cold calling doesn't work anymore, but just to figure out if they're interested, if they'd be interested for a conversation, just to kind of open it up and see if because I didn't want to waste time with people that were going to fight me on it, So after doing that with the marketing major, I had 500 or 600 people that were interested that had either no website or a crappy website and just wanted my service. So I would direct them to this website, which kind of gave them different tiers of complexity and what kind of industry they are. I had a whole checkout system so they could pick and choose which kind of service they wanted for their business. And all I'd have to do once I got to the checkout system was I built a website for a lawyer who wrote me a independent contractor agreement that I can use for any company. Okay. And basically there was an e-signature option where you could just kind of sign online and then click send, and that would send the contract directly to me. Once they click send, they'd get like a little Square Cash link, like an online payment link, where they could pay for half up front, half upon completion of the project. And the whole process would only take 4 days because the website was basically already coded. So all I had to do was upload all the media, like images, pick their color scheme, and then upload all their content. And then it was done. So it would take 4 days. And my selling point was I can do this at a third of the price from digital marketing companies, and I can do it in a tenth of the time. And they'd have a great website automatically that worked on any device. So that business model paid for college while I was working as a security guard. And then while I was doing that, I started a new job in research for a company called Rain King. And my job was international research. So I called European markets it was basically corporate espionage. Like at the end of the day, I was gathering intel for other sales companies to use so they could like pinpoint what kind of products they need.
Okay.
So it was like corporate espionage basically. But since I was operating on European markets, I was calling French and German speaking countries. So Austria and France, obviously, and Switzerland and Germany, but on their time. So that meant I had to get up at 4, take the first train out into Bethesda, and then call people until about 11, which is 5 o'clock their time.
Because at this time, were you still working at Aflac?
No, this is after Aflac. I left Aflac because it was not going anywhere. It was kind of a little pyramid scheming.
Okay.
They were just like, build your own business and make your own book and
yeah,
you'll be successful on your own. No, but yeah. So I went with Rain King, and then after 11, I just inputted all the research and did work until 5. So it was like a 4 a.m. to 5 kind of job. And then so after, I still kept the campus thing, the campus security, while I was a Catholic. And then once I left, I went to Stony Brook. I decided that I wanted to have like a real job, so I applied to I put on a suit and went around my town in Oyster Bay with like 50 resumes and business cards. Like I looked up businesses and their addresses. Any business that seemed professional to me, like I didn't care what the industry was. I had no tolerance. I was such an easy lay when it comes to business because I could have worked anywhere. So I applied to credit claiming agencies and insurance companies and medical device companies and basically any office in Oyster Bay, Long Island, that would take me, I applied to. Just came in a suit and said, look, I'll work for free for a week just so I can learn no matter what. I just kind of had that hustle that people liked. And then one office took me in, which was Raymond James, the office of Alex Gallego. I worked as an associate. Basically, I was in charge of his marketing and his seminars, and then I kind of shadowed him, and he was a one-man show, so I got to really get that one-on-one time, and that was lucky because I wasn't thrown into the fire pit with like 50 other people I'm competing with. I was just there to work and learn.
So that accelerated your process for learning.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because it was just one-on-one, So at the time, it was like a good middle ground, and then so I worked for him for like I think a year and a half, a little more.
So what year of college is this?
This was junior year.
Okay.
I think the beginning of junior year. And then senior year, I worked. So I had started like working for a decent amount at that point, and I found an in with a better company called Morgan Stanley. And Morgan Stanley is considered, I think, either the number 1 or number 2 like bank in America, or like it's more of a financial advising and brokerage firm. So I was working in a financial advising capacity, and so this job was an opportunity. I got in, and there were 3 very intimidating guys, all partners, that had 3 different interviews with me. At the time, I had my resume, my letter of recommendation, and I think that was also a big benefit was wherever you go, Amy, like make sure you get a letter of recommendation before you go, because it's a hell of a lot more impressive when you have like after 4 or 5 jobs, you have letters of recommendation of like if you have 3 or 4,
Mm-hmm.
than it is just to have a resume and a cover letter. So no matter
From
what,
like previous positions, just like have a copy of that, like a letter of
have
recommendation.
a copy of that signed on letterhead that you worked at this company, and that people had some nice things to say about you because they will read it. And so having a cover letter definitely helped. A letter of recommendation.
That I think that yeah, that definitely distinguishes you. It makes you more distinct and
Hmm.
kind of it separates you from the pile again.
Yeah, yeah. So I had my letters of recommendation, and then I applied to Morgan Stanley, and it was the little things that I think worked. You think because people they get like 50,000 resumes a day and cover letters, and they can't parse through all that crap. They can't figure out who's really going to be a good fit. So that's where all the extra stuff comes in. Like you don't think the extra stuff matters? It really does. So I brought in chocolates for the receptionists before my interview.
Really, that's interesting.
Yeah, I brought in like little chocolates and biscuits for the receptionist to have while I was in my interview, and I had like a cover letter and my recommendations, and I spoke about all my different various jobs, and then towards the end, afterwards, I like wrote a thank you card and sent that over to them.
Hmm.
And a combination of the thank you card and the chocolates is what got me hired. Not anything, not my. They didn't. I guarantee you, they didn't even look at my school. That's the other thing that I kind of want to say is that it's kind of sort of counterproductive, but GPA
Doesn't
and
matter as much as you
where
think.
I don't. I have worked in probably every possible industry you can think of and a lot of jobs. Not once has my GPA been on my resume or ever referenced. It's never ever been used. Obviously, you needed to graduate and you needed to, if you're on the dean's list for a while, I'm sure that has an impact. But in terms of the actual number, no, it's never come up in
Yeah, I don't think
like
it's as
history of
important as
working.
people think. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier with my friend kind of discussing the value of having a degree. It's more to just prove that you're capable. It doesn't matter what you did. It's what you do on top of that and past that. And a big point that I want to bring up is I've recently, like this semester, like I'm graduating in May, I've gotten into a lot of interviews this semester. And almost every interview that I've gone to now, they don't point out my GPA. They don't talk
Mhm.
about me being a math major. They talk about how I have a podcast because I put this on my resume now. I tell
Yeah.
them that I've made my own website, that I'm putting out this content, that I'm doing this on a daily basis, and they always ask, it's like, why do you do this? Like, what is this? This is interesting. This is why we picked you because it distinguishes me. It's just
Hmm.
one thing that makes you special in a pile of people trying to be special.
Yeah,
You need to be different from those trying to be different, and
exactly.
it's difficult, but everyone needs to find that one thing that will distinguish them.
Mhm. It's backwards. I personally, I'm a fan of it now because I think that is a sign of progress. Because maybe 15 years ago, people that had college degrees were important. People that, had particular GPAs and stuff like that mattered. And that's always what our parents told us because that's how they got their job. So they assume it's the same way. But it's gotten to the point where we're in this I guess era of educational inflation where anything that you do is just it's not going to be enough. It doesn't matter if you have a master's or a PhD um, or what school you went to. It's so inflated to the point now that everybody has a degree that nobody has a degree. So
Right.
at that point, that's not what stands out anymore. And what stands out is individuality. It's what you do outside of work. It's how you separate yourself from the pack. And I like that. I think that that's definitely progress. So that's the one thing I noticed is like through every job application I've had, ultimately when you're in the interview or when you're writing it in a cover letter, people don't want to see someone, especially if you're 21 years old, that has all this experience and all this education because you don't. You know,
Yeah.
if they wanted someone who had experience and who had years of practice and had all these skills, then they go with a 30-year-old person who's been in the industry for years, right? Not a 21-year-old who's just getting out of college. If they're hiring a 21-year-old, even considering them, it's not for their experience. It's for what they do outside of that. It's their ability to be molded and
Adaptability.
their ambition, how hard they're willing to work, their grit. They're not looking for someone who's experienced and tired. So the thing that people look for is passion for the company and passion for what you do at the end of the day. If you can show that you care about the business that you're going to be working for, and that you've done your research and that you really love what you do and what you could potentially be doing, you will be hired. Like there's no doubt about it. You'll never have to worry about that, because that's what any company looks for. You could have zero skills, and it's happened all. I'm sure you've heard of stories where people get hired and they have zero skills in that job.
I mean, not to sound jealous or anything, but sometimes it pisses me off because I know some people who are, just economics majors or finance majors or whatever it may be, and to me it's because I'm a double with math and economics, so I know the difference in and we talked about this, being in a STEM field versus being in a non-STEM field. The difference in the amount of work you have to put in for the academia itself,
it's massive.
It's drastic. The difference is crazy.
Yeah. I coasted through college. It was classes were just, honestly, they're throwaways. I mean, that's why I think, there's double standards with a lot of it.
Right.
It seems that a lot of the, I don't want to say 1% because that's such an ignorant term, but a lot of the people that are considered more successful are these kind of Tony Robbins sales kind of people who start their own business and learn how to work the system.
Right, and I 100% agree with that, because another good example is Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss was a philosophy major in college, and look at where he is now. He's one of the most well-known tech moguls for his stock diversification, multiple books for bestseller, and he talked about his college background, and that's not the reason he got into tech. He got into it just because he got into it.
Yeah.
And going back to what I was talking about, it's when I see some of these people, I realize that school isn't what is important anymore. It really doesn't matter at this point. It's really what you do outside of school.
Exactly. It's what makes you happy. And that kind of gets me to my next point, which is after Morgan Stanley, so after I got the job, I worked there for 2 years, and it had gotten to the point where the next decision I made was going to solidify what I was going to do for 20 years. Because it was that tipping point, and I could feel it. So I was, at the time, there's different licenses and brokerages that you can get to become a financial advisor.
There's the 6, 63, and the 7 are the big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 7 is considered one of the hardest tests you can take in any industry. It's equivalent to the bar, but for finance.
Okay.
And just to kind of give you an idea of the odds that were up against me for this kind of thing. At the time, there's a financial advising training program where you're paid on a daily basis to come in and study for 8 hours a day for 3 months straight. So to study for the 7. And even after that, even after studying for 8 hours a day, 3 months straight, and being paid to do it, the pass rate was only still 50%.
Oh my God.
So, and the book is about that thick. It's massive. It's bigger than the Bible, and it's, but that's what it is to you. Literally, you're studying the Bible of finance for months and months. So that was my next thing. Is I studied and I studied, but I was also going to school at the time, and I was working. I wasn't in this training program. I didn't have that opportunity, so I was working full time, and I was going to school, and it was finals week while I was doing it, and I was studying for the 7. I had 3 or 4 all-nighter kind of days, because it was just
everything.
It was rough. So the first time I failed miserably. Second time, missed it by 2 points, and the third time I took it, I passed by 5 points. Totally, I guarantee, I cried. I bawled. I was so happy, because that was the hardest thing I've ever done, was that stupid test. So the funny thing is, after you've taken that test, then you're pretty much guaranteed after the 63, which is basically the same thing, to become a financial advisor. And then they were poaching me to work at their New York headquarters as a financial advisor, and they were going to give me my own book and start me off in this business. And that was the catalyst. That was the tipping point where I would have been all right, well, I guess my career started now, and I was working for this one of the financial advisors I was working for had a side business where he made these cufflinks, and he had a marketing team that was helping him with that. So I had offered to build his website for him just for free because he was my boss and I wanted brownie points. And he, yeah, like honestly, anything I could do. But I was introduced to the marketing company that helped him, and it was all young people. All the environment was different. It was the office looked like Google. It was creative business where it was diverse, and you got to get to know all these different companies, and it was very fluid in terms of the different type of roles you can get, and the type of job was much more casual. You didn't have to wear a suit every time, and it was new, and there was energy behind it. It wasn't some kind of like antiquated, institutionalized kind of business like finance, where everyone just kind of has some sort of stick up their ass where they don't know what they want to do, but they know that they're just kind of basically they're making like these little graves for themselves in their own business, and I didn't want that. I didn't want to like work for 50 years in the same company, basically doing the same thing with a different title.
I had an interview at Morgan Stanley actually for being the FAA program, the Final Financial
Yep.
Advisor Associate program.
Hmm.
And I went into the office, and this is one of the only offices where while I was there, everyone just looked so upset.
Yep.
No one seemed to be having a good time. Everyone was just like you could tell that they were just going cold call to cold call, couldn't enjoy anything that they were doing. Been working at this for like decades, and the energy was just so cold, and it put me off so fast, and it was really disheartening. It was just like, damn,
Hmm.
like this just looks so upsetting.
Yeah, everyone's wearing the same gray suit, and their desks are beautiful. I'll say that they're like beautiful desks and like nice paintings everywhere.
Beautiful.
And it was actually really funny because at the time when I got the job at Morgan Stanley, I worked at a cubicle for I think 2 months, and then a financial advisor left, and I had come in during a time of crisis and kind of like hauled ass and really saved them a little bit. So they moved me into that office. So that was like my first own office. And at the time, it was like, I had like paintings, I like set myself up, and I got so much shade from the financial advisor across from me because he had the exact same office and he had been working there for like 30 years. Um, so like people were just unhappy, they were just, no one seemed like they were enjoying their job. But then I discovered this marketing company and just decided to, like, that was a big leap of faith. I decided to apply because, despite all the experience I had in this one industry, I knew that if the next decision I made was for finance, I would never get out. So I made the decision. I applied to this marketing and advertising company, and I got the job. And I immediately loved them. I mean, and that interview process kind of went the same way. I brought in some donuts for the kitchen for the people to have
Yeah, yeah.
while I was in my interview. They were gone in like 30 seconds. I had my letters of recommendation, and they had asked me to build a website as a project, and like I went above and beyond that and like built 3 of them. And during that process, I got to learn a lot more about coding at the same time. So it was very useful. And then once I finally got the job, I told my parents, and they were devastated. They were so pissed. Oh my God, because they worked in finance, and I was
Yeah.
going to be like their little financial advisor, and because at the time, everyone has those kind of society, like those positions
Expectations.
that are depicted by society to be
Yeah,
successful.
yeah, yeah.
Your attorneys, your doctors, your financial advisors, your real estate agents, your accountants. There's certain roles that society has said if you do this, you're successful. You will get a great wife and a great car and a great house.
The
And
white picket fence house, the
yeah,
dog,
like that's
all of
that's the
that stuff.
successful definition, right? And I think that's absolute bullshit. I think that if you wanted to be a hot dog salesman and you were passionate about selling hot dogs and like you knew like you discovered amazing recipes and you knew how to really market yourself and you just dedicated an 80-hour work week to that job because you loved it and you became the best possible hot dog salesman in the world, guarantee you're going to make as
You're
much
making
money or more than anybody
yeah,
else.
and you're gonna be happy doing it because you cared about it.
Exactly. So that's the approach I took, and I was like, what, I have families that have like predetermined notions about what's successful, and you have a lot of families that think about business the same way they think about religion. Like, this is what you've been doing for ages, and it's successful, and it's better than anything else. Why? Because it's just better.
Yeah,
That's
and
it.
not not to like plug myself or anything, but I always like mentioning it is that coming from an immigrant family, coming from that same background, like almost everyone that I've talked to, they have come from these backgrounds where their family has these expectations of what works, like this route, this perfect like yellow brick road to how to be successful. But and this goes back to something you said earlier, where like you just Google it.
Yeah.
We live in an age and at a time where you can do literally anything. And on top of that, being in the U.S., if you're in the U.S., I don't think you're limited to anything. You can do whatever you want. You just have to have the drive, passion, and resources to get you there. And that's all that matters.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that I'm discouraging people to going to college. I think you can always do that, and I think that is unfortunately it's necessary to get that kind of piece of paper. But college is also what you make of it. For me, it was getting that piece of paper. For somebody else, it could be, if you're passionate about something, it's an opportunity to basically like have unlimited resources to learn.
Right.
And like, so I'm not dissing college in any way. Well, maybe a little, but but I do think that like, you shouldn't forego one for the other.
Right. I
Do
think
both.
a conversation I have all the time with the people in the room is that when you're in college, you're at an age where you don't know what you want to do, so it's always good to have that while you're figuring it out. Because being idle is always the worst thing that you can do. So if you're just being idle trying to figure it out, it's, there's a 50-50 chance you're either going to end up successful or it's just not going to work at all. But if you're in college and you're going for that degree, you have a fallback plan. Because without that degree, you're worth almost nothing now in the job market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a foothold. It gets you in. But basically, once I started in that industry, I started as a web developer, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. It was just training and training and training, and you're paid to learn. Like I was learning about coding and Photoshop and different like visual hierarchies and color pickers and schemes, and I was learning about I was getting an hourly inspiration. Like I had an hour just for design inspiration. What kind of company has that? And like you get paid for that. You get paid to basically look at beautiful things for an hour, and like learn how you can do them yourself. And that kind of business, like I thought was awesome because it's genuine, it's authentic. Like you're doing something, you're creating good work. You're not just moving things around. So I got into that for about a year and a half, and then that company was acquired by a much bigger company called Scorpion. And after that merger, we were the biggest company in the nation for that industry.
For
so,
development?
Sorry, for design and digital marketing.
Okay.
And from there, it's been crazy because I took on a different role as a creative project manager, basically like a creative director for advertising, but a little bit more focused on managing the projects themselves as opposed to approving designs. So that role was insane. It's still insane, and that's my current role. It's basically you work with a team of content writers and designers and coders and salesmen to basically make an entire like design campaign work. You approve designs, you coordinate with the client, you basically do all the research and intel, you discover how their business works and what their goals are. You actually build out the website and the campaign yourself, and then you assign it to designers who take it from there. So the volume at which they operated was so much higher. That's when the hustle came in. That's when like the real work came in, like the 70-hour work weeks, the all-nighter works, and it's definitely, I think, what everyone has to go through at some point in their lives. You hear people that found a business and then just kind of made it work, and that's not true. Everyone has to go through that hustle period where they work crazy work weeks
just
for nonstop. It's just everyone has to do it.
But I think what happens is that when you get thrown into that hustle mode, it's not like it can never be a planned hustle mode. It'll just happen. You're not thinking about it. You get pushed in, not pushed into it. You fall into it, and it's just your daily routine has become this. You just do you're not paying attention to the time. You're just putting in the time because you have to, and you just keep going with it, and it keeps happening, and it kind of snowballs into you just have to keep going.
Yeah, and I think that obviously it's good for a while, but it helps you move on to your next thing. And I mean, it sounds like you don't want to sound ungrateful when you do this, but whenever I get a job, um, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm always looking for the next thing. Like my resume is always up to date. My portfolio is up to date. My cover letters are good to go, and I'm getting notifications about new jobs through Glassdoor and anything else. Just like constantly keeping your options open. Obviously, you want to commit to the current job you have, but you never want to limit yourself. You know, you never want to build your own casket, basically. You know, and kind of make yourself too inaccessible. Mm-hmm. You know, because you don't know when your next opportunity is going to come.
Exactly.
You don't know.
My biggest fear is that once I start a career, I never want to have that feeling of I'm at a dead end. And that is, you know, going back to Morgan Stanley, that's the feeling I got from a lot of those people there. It's like, I'm at a dead end. I can't go anywhere from here. And I never want that feeling because, you know, and I think it's more possible now because of how the economy is and how, you know, like we're talking about just how getting a job is different today. But like those old school types of positions, I don't think that's how you can be the most successful. It's consistently, you know, keeping everything up to date, moving, and just learning with time and just trying to be the best you can at whatever you're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that you know, ultimately that's why you should constantly be looking for that next thing. You know, obviously you don't want to be a puddle jumper because that's what millennials are accused of doing is jumping from job to job without showing any real commitment to something. Mm-hmm. So I think that a good, I guess, level, if there is even a level, is like 2 years. You know, you spend 2 years at a company because that gives you enough time to learn your trade and to get some really experience under your belt, and also show that you can commit to a role if you need to. If you have little like 8-month spurts of things, it shows that people are just, you know, that you're willing to leave no matter what, you know.
Right.
And
there's no like real
it's not
commitment.
always. Yeah. So ultimately, to a company that was a big role. So that's why, you know, despite looking for other jobs, I'm still sticking with this place until the 2-year mark. You know.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm applying to another job right now, and it's probably the most challenging thing I've done in a while, because with every previous role I had, there was an in. There was someone I knew that could get me in the door.
Right.
And with this particular company, there isn't, and it's a different type of application because I'm not applying to a job because I hate my current one. That's not why I'm doing it. I like my current job. I'm doing it because this particular company is the one that I want to work for. Like, just because of their values, their culture, the type of work that they do, their history, it just makes sense to me, you know. So I'm currently applying to that role, and this is a perfect example of how the common or like the traditional interview process no longer works. So they get about 4,000, I guess, applications a year. It's a big company. It's like 700 people. It's been around since the 70s, and they don't their ability to hire people is very, very limited, and they have a very, very, very strict process when it comes to even getting people in the door to interview. But, you know, the fact that you're doing a podcast is a good example of a way in, because people look for people that embrace ambiguity, and they look for people that kind of have a bit of uniqueness about them, you know, that shows that they have passionate things that they really want to focus on. So, for example, one person was hired because he had like a side project called a GIF dance party.
GIF dance party?
Yeah, where he made this little program where you could set up like a dance floor behind it, and then there were like 3 different GIFs that you could move around on the dance floor. Okay. They were just like constantly looping, and you could add more dancers and change the music, and you could like, you know, make your own little dance party and record it. And it's like a goofy little like stupid project, and you didn't know what it meant or what it did, but they loved that about him. You know, because it was like a unique, like, goofy, weird thing that makes you.
It's like something he wanted to put his time into, and he did it just because he could.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, like, you know, if he had a passion for it and you think it's kind of fun, then why not, you know? So that's the kind of thing that gets you hired today. It's not so much about your experience and about, you know, what it says on your resume. It's more so about showing how much you care about the job and how much you care about the business and the industry you're in, but also showing that you know, you have ideas and that you have passions and
innovation.
innovations, and that you're ambitious. That like you can start things. You're not just a potato that just kind of goes through life.
Right.
So for example, right now, so I have my resume and my cover letter and my portfolio done, and and my letters of recommendation. I sent that over. It was like this beautiful package, and there wasn't even an application process. I just emailed it to the HR directors there because it wasn't listed on their website for the role I wanted. Haven't gotten an email back yet. But instead of kind of giving up and just getting discouraged, what I'm going to be doing instead is taking a page out of that like new application book. So I am doing a comic illustration of what I think my interview process is going to go like. 'Cause it's kind of fun, and like it's stupid. You don't know, like, so yeah, because I illustrate a little bit here and there, and that's like a little pet project.
Right.
So that's one thing I'm going to send is like a little like comic strip of how I think the process is going to go. And then another thing I'm going to be doing is making a. Have you heard of like is it the Myers-Briggs personality test?
Yeah, yeah. I think so. Like to get like the 4-letter type of personality
Yeah.
you are. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the position I'm applying for is design researcher, and so based on research, your job is to figure out why people do what they do, and how you can apply it to this particular business. So I'm making a game, like a card game with like dice and stuff, that is basically question based. So depending on the answer you get from the interviewee, you basically you would roll like a different colored dice. So like there's a yellow and a red and a blue side or whatever,
Okay.
and all the cards are colored differently as well. And each color corresponds to the type of question or the type of personality trait that person would meet. So
Okay.
if you roll the dice and it's a blue, it might be professional question. So it could be, have you ever been fired or something, or something like that. And then depending on the answer, you can put that into like the yes or the no pile, right? And you kind of build up those yes or nos. And then once the game is done, you take your pile of yeses and you kind of add them together.
Okay.
And then like that, based on that, you can figure out what kind of personality they are.
Huh. That's interesting.
It sounds like stupid and like almost too simple, but it's a fun way to like. I think play is definitely necessary in any business.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. And I also I talk about this with a lot of people is that in an economy, you're always working with people. An economy doesn't work unless you're working with others. That's just how the system is. So if you can't be sociable or capable on that level, like you're not going to function in a firm.
No, and I think that like it sounds that people don't really consider it as much, but I think that play should be a really powerful part of any business. Like my office has Nerf guns that we whip out at 5 o'clock and we go nuts on people. Like
That's amazing.
like it's just fun. Like we go out drinking way too much, and we like we have an Xbox and a Wii and like cornhole and like giant Jenga and massage chairs with VR headsets and like all this crazy stupid stuff. And like I have board games once a month with my team.
Mm-hmm.
Like so I bring in a board game and we play for like 2 hours. And
Yeah, I mean it's team building, like
yeah.
you have to have that structure where everyone is supportive of each other. Like you're saying with Morgan Stanley, like when you're at that firm and that person from the other side of the office was just mad that you got this position and he's been there for so long, that doesn't breed as much success as if all of you had worked together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean ultimately it also helps inspire creativity, because I think that the issue with Morgan Stanley was everyone was out to get each other. Mm-hmm. I had people that would tell me false information just because they're out to get me, so that I could fail. Like they would tell me information that was like clearly wrong, specifically because they wanted my job, and that's not the kind of environment that I want to work in.
Yeah,
You want to be able to make others successful, and you also want to kind of collaborate and just start experimenting. Like no idea is wrong. So the whole board game thing, or at least the card game, it gives you an opportunity to kind of think of new ideas. It triggers things.
Right.
Like if you're in a circle with your designers and coders, and it kind of also opens up the opportunity for conversation too.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately we're in this kind of capitalistic society where pretty much everyone is a sociopath. Everyone. Like,
Yeah.
like if you, I don't know, like my job self is definitely not like my personal self. If you put on a suit and you go to Morgan Stanley, you are not acting the same way that you would when you
Putting on a
leave that
show.
office.
Putting on a
You're
show.
putting on a show.
Yeah.
You have fake motivation. You're like you have fake organizational skills and personal skills. You try to connect with anybody and like yes sir, no sir. Um, you try to like you think of groupthink and you try to like I don't know fit in. Everyone's a sociopath when it comes to business, and it's unfortunate because that's exhausting.
Yeah.
Like the reason why you're mentally exhausted at the end of the day is because you have to pretend all day
That
to
you're
be
someone else.
someone that you're not, you know?
Yeah.
And when you throw in things like, playing life with your friends or something at work, people put their shields down and they're just normal people again, and you get to riff about ideas and you get to throw things back and, start having conversations. And I think that's how real businesses are built, is on building relationships that are authentic. And, if you're who you are at work, if you're the same person you are at home than you are at work, then you don't have the 9 to 5 mentality. You could stay till 7 or 8 and come in at 7 because you love what you do and you don't feel like you have to be a different person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that's why I think it's really important. So that's where the whole card game comes into play, because if people are rolling dice and they find like I don't know some like Joker card or some like wild card or something in my pack, and it's a random question like I don't know, have you ever done something stupid or like I don't know like
Whatever
done
it may
like
be. Yeah. Something that's
yeah.
just like, personable. Something that's, more on a personal level.
Or just make it fun and interactive, then like it starts to spark conversations
Right.
and it starts to
You open up the
build
dialogue.
relationships. And I got a good example of this is like men versus women. I think that everyone has like a masculine and feminine energy, yes, but there are like definite men versus women. And I think that when it comes to girls, when they first start making you friends, they face you head on, and they say I love your hair, it's so pretty, I love your dress, do you want to play with me, like do you want to like, so it's very face to face, and girls are always like that. They'll talk about anything and everything, but they do it face to face. Guys are a little different. Guys build relationships and socialize based on side to side interactions. So you build relationships if someone's next to you and you're doing something. Like if you're building, or you're playing a sport, or you're playing video games, or you're
Right.
like
I was just about to say that because
yeah,
like all of us playing Fortnite right now, like that is a really crucial part of getting to know someone better. I feel like as a guy, and the best example, and this may sound dumb, is like playing Call of Duty when I was in high school. Like that is what made me so much closer to my friends.
yeah.
Because we worked as a
It's
team.
not about the game itself.
Yeah.
It's about what you're doing together. Like, I don't remember who I heard this from, but like, there's a reason guys are so obsessed with construction. Like, if someone's building something over there, you gotta go take a look. Like, if I get just pictures of someone in their house, be like, Mary, I think like Joe is making something over there. I want to go see what's going on. And then you peer in and you walk and say, oh, what you building? And like everyone kind of they migrate like some kind of zombie force. That's why at construction sites, when you see those big nets and there's like a big mark over it and there's a hole in it, that's so like guys can pop their heads and be like,
What's going on?
what you building? What you making? Because like guys operate on that mentality that if you're doing something and you're kind of involved in the same process, it's a conspiracy, and that's how relationships are built. So if you're playing a board game, if you're playing a card game, you're kind of subconsciously opening yourself up. You can talk about things that are more personal. You can share experiences a lot easier than if it's face to face. Because if it's face to face, it's an interview. If it's side to side, it's a conversation. And I think that's why a lot of therapists, well, child therapists, will they have games and like card games and stuff, and that's how they have every
Shields down.
yeah, every meeting with kids is they play games with them, because it gets them to relate and it gets them to break down a little bit.
Makes sense.
So I think that every business should kind of operate off of that idea.
I agree.
So it just makes things more personal. So yeah, that's where I am now. That's where I'm going. Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. So I was actually just gonna ask to so we could sum it up. Is the last question I always ask is kind of what you see yourself doing next year. We kind of already went over that with you
Mhm.
applying to more jobs and staying at this company for 2 years. But anything a little bit, if anything, more specific than that that you could bring up. And then the last thing is just if you have any like tidbit of advice or some really weighted statement that you could tell people who tune into the podcast, just let them know. And yeah, so we'll sum it up with that.
Okay. Well, up next, I kind of already told you a little bit is applying to this company.
Yeah.
Um, Ultimately, I think that um, my calling is never going to be found.
Okay.
And I think that the reason why is because everyone operates out of like people have to get over the whole like finding your passion thing. No, if you find something that you like and then you're good at, you decide to be passionate about it. You decide to be grateful for it, and you'll suddenly realize that like every bit of everything that you do is just better. It just feels better because you appreciate while you're doing it. Like I've seen dishwashers that are happier than most people that are making, six-figure salaries. It's because they decide to be happy when they do. But anyway, the reason why I'm never going to find whatever that vocation is because careers and life kind of works like a funnel. So, you start at the rim. Let's say you're in high school and you try out like a science fair for the first time, and you discover that you love biology, and you wanted to talk about tadpoles in your science fair. So you bring in tadpoles, and you have like a whole presentation with little like collage of stuff, and you like doing it, and no one has to tell you to do it because you just wanted to. So that at that point you're at the outer rim of your funnel, and then you start taking more science classes, and you realize that you actually have a knack for it. So you start taking labs, and you go on like class projects, and that funnel gets a little bit more narrow. And then once you go to college, you sign up for pre-med in biology, right? And then your funnel gets a little bit more narrow, and you figure a little bit more that actually part of the biology aspect that you really like is the fertility aspect. You like the whole process of giving birth, and you like that that whole delivery aspect. So you go focus more on being a doctor in like a fertility ward, and then maybe you're a little bit more narrow. So then you go into med school and you specialize with children. So then maybe you're pediatric and you take a different route. So you keep making these decisions that keep like chipping away and tailoring what you want to do, and it makes that funnel more and more narrow, and it makes it more and more specific about what you want to do and where you want to go. And then you get to the end where you're at like the most specific possible place you can be, and you're doing well at it. And then you suddenly decide that this is not what you want to do anymore. That it had its run, and this isn't what you want to do, and you want to try something different. So then you jump out of that one and you go to a whole new funnel, and that funnel you start the whole process over. And that's what I did with design. That's what I did with marketing. I started with people that were just out of college. I had like 6 years of experience on these guys in another industry, but you just can't start at where you were in a new business because you don't know it. And a new funnel, you have to start from the beginning because you have to figure out what you want to do,
Right.
And so you go through the whole process again. And I guarantee that by the time I get to the bottom of the funnel, I'm going to be like, oh, I want to be a writer. And then I'm going to go back up to the top again. And then that's how life goes, I think. And I think that for me, the next rung down in the funnel is probably what I always wanted to do, which was research.
Okay.
Because ultimately, I've tried the sales process. I've been in the approval stage of things where you have to sell to clients an idea that they don't want to hear. I've tried the processing stage where you're basically like a unit in a machine where you input data and you basically work as hard as you can to move numbers around and information around. I've done that. I've done the whole sales shtick and everything in between, and I think that everything I come back to is ultimately research. And by research, I mean getting to know people, getting to know businesses and how they operate, what makes them special, and delivering insights, because that's the intangible thing that makes you very valuable. People are always, they're deliverable, and what they're motivated by is different based on your role. So, for example, If you're a designer, then your deliverable, what makes you great and valuable and special and more special than anybody else, is how creative you can be with your designs, right? It's how innovative you can be with your designs, and that's how you're valued. If you're a like an associate or a project manager or like I don't know, a product manager, then your job is speed. How fast can you be? You know, how detailed can you be in your reports and stuff like that? And if you're a salesman, how many people can you bring in? If you're a chef, how creative can you be with your work? How fast can you whip out meals? Stuff like that. There's always a deliverable, an ultimate deliverable. There's one in any business. And for me, I think that if you can quantify them, then you're in for like a big workload. Because at that point, if you can quantify what your deliverable is, then you're a processing unit. Then it's just about how fast can you push out work, and how many numbers can you generate, how much money can you make for these people, and that's not where you want to be. Where you want to be, at least where I want to be, is insight based. It's ideas, and I think that that's not quantifiable. It's incredibly valuable because insights can lead to things like, for example, I just read an article about this company that wanted to redesign the hospital experience, and to do that, a couple of people that had different projects, but ultimately the winning idea was a 5-minute video of just like a ceiling with like lights at the top, and it's like slightly moving, and someone comes in and out here and there, and you're like, what the hell's going on? And you get bored by it, and you get tired, and then like, all right, can we see something? It's just like a bland gray wall with those big like white panels and lights. And the context of that video is that's what patients see when they're
in that hospital bed.
When they're lying down in the hospital.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible experience because it's just, you hear that beeping all the time, and it drives you nuts because nothing's going on. So a couple ideas came out where they changed some designs at the top. They made the walls and the ceiling all like whiteboard, so families could write little messages like "get well soon" and stuff like that all over.
That's
so
awesome.
It's like and obviously you'd erase it after. Hopefully they don't die, but like they leave. And then like you can make things personal. You can make little games up front that make it more interactive, but that insight came from one person who did the research and went into that experience and said, this is different, this is what we should be doing, this is the problem. And you can't quantify that. There's no number. You can't put it into an Excel sheet. You can't there isn't like a dollar sign you can put behind it. It's just good, valuable information, and that'll always be useful. So
it's just
for me, that's if you're
it's not
contributing to
quantifiable, but
society.
valuable. Yeah.
If you're contributing to society in a way that people didn't think about, then I think that you're succeeding. So for me, my next role is research based.
Okay, awesome.
So,
and then the last thing is just if you have anything that you want people who are tuning into this podcast to know, or like because you've done so much over the past couple of years, and you're always making moves. If there's one like real statement that you think is like of utmost important to let people who listen know, because most of my focus is to reach out to 20-year-old people that are like my age, early 20s, and really trying to figure it out. And you're someone who's kind of already gone through a lot of this and gone through more of the trials. So if there's any one thing that you could say, just let the people know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Ultimately, there's like somehow there's a change the world idea that everyone wants to talk about in a podcast, and I think that that's tough to do. But I don't know, if there's one thing that I wish I had known a long time ago before I got into any of this, it's don't let other people decide what you want to do. Don't let, and by other people I don't just mean your parents or your friends. I mean what society is telling you is successful, what your friends and family and people at school, your teachers, for the rest of your life, you're going to have someone telling you how you should be doing something. And whether it's through social media or through what's it called, through pop culture telling you that you should have this house and you should have this Audi and you should have this clothes and you should wear a suit because it looks great, and you want this house by the water and be traveling all the time and all that kind of stuff. And I think that if I learn anything, it's that none of that matters. None of it. I think that this is going to sound a little existential, but you're on this planet for like 80 something years, hopefully 100. I don't know. But are you really going to like cater 60 of them to, making sure that you fit the mold? And ultimately, that's how our entire society is structured, behind our education and the way that our careers are set up. Just don't let anyone tell you how to live your life, but be open-minded. I think that people also get stuck in their ways and they get comfortable, and that can have an impact too. A perfect example is that's a stupid example, but I wear like Levi 511s now, which are kind of like on the skinny side. And if someone told me like a year ago that I'd be wearing like skinny jeans, I'd be like, but no, fuck you, I'm not gonna wear them. They're stupid. They're like, no, they look ridiculous. And here I am wearing skinny jeans, and like I have a hat and a weird hipstery shit that usually like I wouldn't have done a year ago. But if you take that to any aspect of your life, keeping yourself open-minded and curious about everything will not only give you energy and inspiration and like motivation to get up and do something, but it'll also serve you so well in life, because you're never going to forego an opportunity just because it's not what your dad said is the right thing to do. It's not what where you are. It's not what your town and your city said was like what the most common thing is to do. If you look from culture to culture, things vary immensely in terms of what success is defined as. So why should you listen to any particular society? If you went to Switzerland or France or Germany and try to make it there, you would have a whole different kind of experience.
Right. Keep your options open.
Keep your options open.
And be the best you that you could be. As cliche as it is, it's the truth. It is the truth.
No, I mean, definitely keep your options open, and definitely make sure that at the end of the day, you're doing what makes you happy.
Right. Really important. Lots of value for those statements.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to wrap it up there, because actually I'm mad hungry. I want to make food. But thank you so much for being on the podcast. I can say peace out to the guests. Look at the camera. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll catch you on the next one.